Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Nisha.
How are you?
Very good. You look like you directly came from the bed. Sleepy.
Quite late. Quite late. It was
Yeah.
a lot of work, but yeah, I was supposed to. There's a lot of stuff. So let's push that aside and let's welcome our wonderful photographer for today.
Yeah. Who is concentrated on bird photography. Shashank is also a renewable energy professional
That's great.
and uh, amazing wildlife photographer. So today we are going to hear from him how to better our photography and how what is his experience, his journey in wildlife photography or bird photography. Let's welcome Shashank.
Hi, Shashank.
Hi there, Nisha. Hi,
Hi.
Hermes.
Hey, welcome to our show.
Right, thank you so much. Thank you once again for the opportunity as well.
It's our
It's our
honor,
pleasure.
and it's always great to see somebody from who is directly and indirectly connecting to conservation. So your field is definitely, be it a photographer or energy field, it's going to be in line with what we are doing. So that's another
Yeah.
highlight
Right,
over here.
right.
So, can
So
you
yeah,
please share
start with
something
your
about yourself
journey.
rather than we
All
talking
right.
about you?
Okay. So as you said, I mean, and I've shared earlier as well that I am a renewable energy professional. I've been in this profession now, been working for 24 years. Out of that, for the past almost 14, 15 years, I have been actually working in the RE domain. But I guess we're here to talk about not what I do on the RE domain side, but what we do on the photography side. So
Yes.
I started off as one of those point and shoot photographers for the family, where uh, I had a Yashica, the old film reel kind of camera, and so that's how it started. We used to go out with the family to visit various places, carry the camera quickly, and then shoot whatever you can, and then wait and come back, give the film for developing, and then figure out whether it's really worked out nice or it has not worked out nice. And there were more number of cases where it actually did not work out for a variety of reasons. But so that's how I started off looking at photography. Mobiles obviously weren't there as for clicking photographs at that particular point in time, so we had to make do with these cameras itself. But I guess that's what got me started, and gradually as I progressed, picked up a little bit more of equipment. Uh, Picked up a couple of years later, picked up a P900 from Nikon, because I really felt that the reach of the camera wasn't there with a normal point and shoot camera. It wasn't there. Picked up a P900, took a couple of years with that, figured out what works with it, what does not. And I honestly wasn't really into a genre of photography per se, whether it was wildlife or it was street photography, or I just wasn't into it. I just kept shooting whatever I thought I liked. But over the last couple of years, okay, so when I realized that a P900 perhaps doesn't give me so much of pleasure in photography, but let's see if I can go to, let's say, a DSLR. So I bought a 7500 and took a long 200 500 Nikon lens, and then I realized, then I actually am going to get better at it as time progresses, and that's precisely what happened. And as and birds, and the reason I chose the subject as birds eventually was they were the most accessible, whether at home or close by where I stay in Delhi.
Mhm.
And so and then I realized that I got better and better. I realized that what are the constraints, my constraints, where do I need to improve, and therefore where and what are the limitations of the camera. And very recently, then I said, okay, fine, a 7500 is good, so I don't try my hand at a mirrorless camera. Stuck with Nikon, and then went on to buy a Nikon Z6 II, which I bought it last year, and
Okay.
kept the same 200 500 lens with an adapter. So that's pretty much what I use today for my photography. uh, i I, if you look at my photographs, maybe 2 years, 3 years back, and look at it and today, obviously there is a marked improvement which is there. And I think, and the reason for that is, yes, I have matured as a photographer, and the other thing obviously is that I have picked up the right kind of equipment as I have progressed in this journey. So pretty much that's where I am. I try and shoot as many birds as possible, but whatever comes my way, even if it's animals or if it is anything else, it just gives me a little bit opportunity to be more creative. I do that as well.
That's great.
Great.
Yeah.
So,
Now,
shall we start with the presentation?
Yes, please. We can do that. Let me just bring it
Yeah.
up. Just 1 minute,
Yeah.
and hopefully it should work.
yeah.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. All right. So what I'm going to share today is pretty much my learnings, what has worked for me, and it's not sacrosanct. What really worked for me may not work for somebody else. So you'll have to adapt to it as well in some form or the other. But as I said, the gear which I used, so I started off with a Yashica film roll camera that was way back. A Nikon P900 followed, a Nikon T7500 followed after that, and a Nikon Z6 II, which is very recent. And I use a Nikon 200-500 lens paired with the Z6 II with an FTZ adapter. So that's what I use as far as the gear is concerned. And in terms of editing software, I started off using Snapseed on the mobile, but then I've graduated to using Photoshop and denoise at the moment. So that's what I pretty much use. Now, some do's
Okay.
and don'ts. So, uh, and let me just quickly kind of run through this list. There are about 14 points which I put down. Uh, the first one is that one will have to really learn to hold the camera properly. Whereas the more you take it out, the more you use it, uh, the better you would become. And I think one reason why I say so is because if you don't hold it correctly, you're not using a tripod and you're using a long lens like what I use onto the 200-500, you probably will have a little bit of camera shake, and which will cause your a perfect photograph to actually go a little bit fuzzy as the camera shakes while you take a photograph. The second point is that try and start shooting in RAW, and I'll cover that in the next slide as to why I am saying so. The third one obviously is the oft repeated, oft said, the exposure triangle and the shooting mode. So we'll just cover that very briefly in the next few slides as well. Fourth is rather that we shouldn't be afraid to raise the ISO of the camera. If you feel so, there are ways of compensating the increase in the ISO. So let's not be afraid to do that. Fifth, the most important, and I have made terrible mistakes on this one, that please make a habit of checking the settings before you start shooting. And I have an experience of not maybe 6 months back, I was shooting at the Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary in very close to Delhi. And I was taking a sunset and I put the camera on the manual mode, and I just completely forgot. Uh, and there were some action sequences subsequently, and I was trying to focus it on the autofocus of the lens, and it just did not focus. And it just after 30-40 seconds, I realized what was wrong, but by then the action was already over. So please make it a habit of checking the settings before you start shooting, lest you miss something which is extremely, extremely important. Learn to read the histogram. I think most of us know about it, what it is. Understanding the rule of the thirds, which is nothing but the placement of the image in the overall frame. Typically, we have seen what works is that the image, if it is a little bit off center from the center of the frame, it has a better appeal. So please keep that in mind. Eighth is eyes should always be in focus, and we'll cover that again. And I have some photographs to show you for that. Pay attention to the background. And when I say pay attention to the background, is that try and avoid clutter in the background, because if it is going to be very cluttered frame, the attention is always going to go to the background rather than on the subject. 10th, especially if you're using a long lens, please do invest in a tripod. I did not do it for a very long time, and but when I did, I could see a remarkable improvement in my photographs after that. Because it just gives the camera a little bit more stability, and it gives you a little bit more ease while shooting photographs as well. Try and shoot in the early morning and the evening golden hours, because that's when the light is at the softest, and that's when you can actually create magic, if I can use the word, with your photographs. Photo editing software is something which we all should be looking at. It's like you're being served a meal on a plate, but the way it is positioned on the plate, whether the plate is absolutely spick and span, and that's when the meal has been put up. I think it has a better appeal to it. It can really lift up your photographs. And I'm by no means advocating changing the backgrounds or doing a lot of those things, but just plain good simple editing. Be selective, and when I say be selective, is that when you are posting your pics on the social media, please try and limit yourself to maybe one or two good pics, rather than posting maybe say 10-15 pics of the same type at the same time. If you really want to do it, then perhaps stagger them out, space them out over a 15 days or 20 days between them. Lastly, learn from your mistakes. If you have not been able to click a good photograph, it does not mean that something is wrong uh, with you or with the equipment. It's just that you may have made a mistake with the setting. Analyze it, and before just simply deleting that photograph, and to understand what really went wrong with that. Uh, on the right, then, don't always believe that gear matters. Yes, it does in a lot of cases, but I have seen photographers with dated gear produce spectacular pics as well. So don't believe that always. Uh, Also, don't believe that you always need to travel to distant locations to get best pics. These could be available in your own backyard as well. And I learned that at the time of the closure of everything during the COVID lockdowns this year and the previous year as well. In the vicinity of where I stay, uh, I used to go out every day and try and find out how many species of birds were there, and eventually ended up finding about 30, 40 species of birds, which was very surprising. I didn't know that so many birds could actually come and kind of live around where I stay. So just on the earlier point which I raised, on RAW versus JPEG. So RAW is, to a lot of you would be familiar that RAW is a file format like JPEG, but unlike JPEG, it captures all the image data recorded by your camera's sensor rather than compressing it, where JPEG just kind of compresses everything and puts it together. What this leads to is higher quality images, and you have more control in post processing. So you can correct a lot of errors or improvements, so you can make improvements to the photograph in post processing, especially if it's a raw image. There are a lot of free editing softwares which are available. Nikon has a few, uh, and or you can actually get paid softwares like Photoshop, etc., which you can use for editing as well. Most important is to check your camera if it is actually capable of shooting in RAW, and those should be available within the settings. Next up, the exposure triangle, as it is called. So it simply refers to the three most important elements: the exposure, the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed. These are nothing but three variables which you will have to kind of manage, especially if you're shooting in the manual mode. You balance all three, and you get the sharpest, well-lit photos which are possible with that camera, or even improve upon it. Uh, just a brief description of what it is. So a lot of these new age cameras have ISO capabilities which are going up to 52,000, maybe even 65,000, or maybe even higher. But it basically, ISO just controls the camera's sensitivity to light. A low ISO setting means that the camera will be less sensitive to light, while a higher ISO means it'll be more sensitive to light. So, but the camera capabilities is key. For example, in a bright daylight, you would probably be shooting at 100 ISO. You don't need your camera to be that sensitive to light. But let's say if you're in a dark room or it's cloudy, you will have to significantly bump up your ISO to maybe 800,000, maybe 1200, 1600, depending upon how dark it is, to get more light into your camera. The other point is the aperture. It's just the opening in the lens and controls how much light gets through the camera sensor. So a wider aperture indicated by a lower f number basically means it lets in more light. So your prime lenses, which are like defined by f2.8 and f4, means that they perform better at lower light, whereas a narrow aperture indicated by an f number, higher f number, lets in less light through. So for example, the Nikon 200 500, which I use, has between 200 and 500 focal length. It has a standard f number of 5.6. So pretty much it's it's a versatile lens, but it obviously does not perform as well as a f2.8 or an f4 lens would. The f2.8 f4 lenses are obviously more expensive as well. Shutter speed basically controls how long the shutter stays open when you take a picture. The longer the shutter stays open, the more light gets in. A faster shutter speed is good for freezing action. So, for example, if you're shooting birds, which I pretty much do most of the time, you pretty much work with shutter speeds of 1250, 1600, or 2000 to capture the motion of the bird. Whereas if you're shooting landscapes, etc., or you're shooting a little bit in the dark, and you need more light to go into the camera, or you require a motion blur or something, you probably go with a longer shutter speed. So enough of that theory. I just had those 2 pages, and let's go to some photographs which I wanted to share today. The first, obviously, I talked about earlier was the importance of eye-level shots. Now, most of us, when we shoot, focus on the animal or the bird, and we try and focus and keep the focus as sharp as we can get. But if you see going down to the eye level, so if you go down to the eye level of the bird or the animal, makes a significant difference, and it does make a difference in the perspective which you are showing. So, for example, the cattle egret on the right was at my eye level, but if I had taken it from a little bit higher elevation, it would not have given the same kind of perspective which it is giving right now. The same goes with the fox on the left side, which is a recent shoot, and if it was not for that level, it wouldn't have given the same effect. More importantly, if you are actually at an eye level, if you end up capturing an action movement, then that makes it even better. So here you see the fox, which was yawning as we took the photograph. So that's what it was doing, and so we just got that action. Now, what happens is that when you're shooting, you need to be, and I'll cover that later. We've got a couple of pictures on that as well, but the point remains the same, that you have to be prepared for the unexpected when you're shooting both animals rather, or birds for that matter, because when you have composed everything, you have focused on the bird may suddenly move. It may do something which is, and let's say if you're shooting for a still at a very low shutter speed of 250 or 500 or thereabouts, and the bird moves a little bit faster, or the animal moves a little bit faster, it's very difficult to freeze that motion, and all what you will get is a motion blur for that matter. So one has to be always prepared for the unexpected when you are dealing with birds as well as with animals. And obviously a well composed frame, in this case the fox which is yawning, I could have weaved any story on this. I could have written anything about it, but I thought I'll just share what happened. Actually, the fox was just yawning; it wasn't doing anything else, and so that typically is what it is.
Can I interrupt you in between?
Yes, please. Yeah.
No. There is a band on the screen that you can hide.
This
that
one?
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next point, which is said, that when I said on the focus on the eyes, so here is a short-toed snake eagle, which I had shot recently as well. The more focus you're on the eyes, or the eyes which are sharper, they will always draw attention to the photograph, right? Here we have a profile portrait of the short-toed snake eagle. The eyes are pretty much in focus. the details are as much there as possible, and therefore one tends to look only at these eyes and the face of the eagle rather than looking at anything else in that. So if you have eyes which are in focus, they are sharp, you'll probably get attention onto that photograph for a fraction of a second longer as compared to any other photograph. And I think that's where one photograph will be differentiated from the other. In this case, pretty much the whole of the bird is in focus because I had shot this at a slightly higher f value. This was morning. I had cut down the light which was going into the camera. If I recall correctly, this was at an f8 or any. I think it was it was f8 if I recall correctly. So basically, I had reduced the light and tried to capture as much detail as possible from the subject. And see, when I say, and again mentioning here, weave in a story again here, because every photograph which you take is a moment in time which you have captured.
Yeah.
So if you're able to tell a story behind it, I think that's what engages with the viewers the most.
Totally.
And that makes the story stand, that makes the picture stand out amongst the crowd of photographs which there are today.
Yeah.
Again, landscape versus portrait. So be willing to experiment. You have the portrait on the left and the landscape shots on the right. The chestnut-bellied sandgrouse, and on the left is the Indian courser. There is a reason why on certain photographs a landscape would look better or a portrait would look better, but that doesn't stop you from kind of mixing and matching this. If you had taken the landscape on the courser on the left, you would probably have seen a little bit more of habitat behind him. But if you had taken a portrait with the sandgrouse on the right, it would have shown you more details. So be willing to experiment. We all have digital cameras today, so anything which you don't like can actually be deleted without any harm. The oft-repeated question: what do you chase? Do you chase a focus or do you chase a frame? And my view is that the focus wins always. A sharp pick in a bad frame will always be used, example after cropping, but a blurry pick in an excellent frame will never actually get used. So always chase focus first, the frame can follow. And then that's what I would probably advise anybody, that focus first, look at what the bird is or what the animal is, what it is doing, focus on the animal, and then see how you can actually create that frame, that animal, and hope that the subject doesn't move in the interim. Similarly, in this, a tighter crop of a vernal hanging parrot from Maharashtra. Again, focus first. In this case, I had actually tightly cropped it out because you could see the bajra crop all around the vernal hanging parrot. It was causing too much of disturbance, so I'd actually cropped it with just the parrot and one pod of the bajra crop. The other thing, it's a mottled wood owl, but as a photographer, you cannot control the environment, example, light or where the subject is placed. You have absolutely no control over it. In this case, the mottled wood owl was right in the midst of trees, and there was intermittent light on the wood owl at some places, and some places it was fine. But what you can actually do is that you can always control your shutter speed, aperture, and the ISO for your camera, and try and make the max out of what you are shooting at that particular moment. And please remember, if you're not able to get that shot at that particular moment, there will always be a next time. But it's most important to know what your capabilities of the camera are, what it can do and what it cannot. I think that's what one learning has been for me in the last so many years. I've actually shot with a variety of cameras, that it's very important to understand what it can do and what you can push it for and what you can't. Two frames of the Saras cranes on the left and the right. I would probably ask you which frame is better, and both can tell a story, both are sharp enough, but I think everybody would probably say that the frame on the right is better, simply because it's actually telling a different story. It's about the Saras cranes who are It's a pair of Saras cranes which are calling out in the late in the evening, and it's a magical experience. So I guess everybody would say that the frame on the right is better. The left one is also fine, but I think the right one is better for a lot of people whom I've asked this to. And the reason why I showed this is that there's nothing wrong between the two frames. Both are identical, both are portraits, but the right one perhaps tells us the story a little bit better. Moving on, what you see in the frame is the Oriental dwarf kingfisher with a kill in its beak. Now, every photographer at the location, whether it's you or whomsoever was present at that place, would have the same frame, pretty much the same frame. And then the question is, how do you differentiate yourself? And for that, again, your pick has to be in focus, which is like a tack sharp pick. You crop well. You place it by the rule of thirds. So in this case, if you see the kingfisher is a little bit offset from the center, that's where I have placed it to be. Edit the photograph well. Don't oversaturate or over sharpen. Don't try too many things with the photograph. Let it comes across as doctored. And that's what is going to make your photograph at least visually appealing and standing out amongst the crowd of photographers who were there. You may still not succeed, but at least you would walk away with a very, very good photograph from that experience. What I wanted to convey in this particular photograph was the fact that you cannot always be close to the subject, or you may have a limitation on the lens. For example, you may be shooting with a 70-200 and you may not have had that 200 500 or the 150 600 or whatever the lens you might be using with you at that particular point in time. So you can actually, what you can do is that you can still shoot, but go as wide as possible. Try to keep the subject in focus to the extent possible, and but at the same time create that frame. So it's photography for me has always been creating those frames. Yes, the details or the close-up portraits of birds are necessary. They need to be showcased in your portfolio, but at some time it's not always possible to get those shots. So good frames, as I have written, tell their own story. That's what this frame depicts actually. Incidentally, it was raining, and this was actually taken from a car. So that's how this frame came about. Action shots, again, I've learned it the very hard way. I probably would have missed more than what I have taken. But the learning for me has been that be always ready for movement of the subject, as I was mentioning earlier, and you provide for higher shutter speed. So typically when I shoot birds, I would probably stick to 1,000, 1,250 to begin with, if possible, and if the light permits, that's what I would choose. And making sure that even if the light is bad, try and see if I can bump up the ISO, keeping the aperture as open as possible, just to get the shutter speed right. And so that if the bird moves, I should be able to capture it. The digital cameras come with a lot of with a lot many frames per second speeds, and obviously it's an advantage shooting from them. So for example, on the left, this was multiple shots which I had taken off the egret grabbing the fish, and incidentally one of them came out in this fashion where you can see the drops coming in from the beak of the egret and the fish looking up the beak in a way. On the right is a white-bellied sea eagle, which we had shot in Goa near the Zuari River, where the bird, which was sitting for a very long time, actually sitting without warning, just took off. And because my shutter speed was a little bit higher, I could actually capture it. I would have preferred a little bit more sharper shot, but you get what you get. Similarly, on the left, the great cormorant fishing in Bharatpur Sanctuary in Rajasthan. Again, blazing action, so where you had to actually bump up the speeds of the shutter to actually about 2,000, 2,500 to capture that motion. On the right, the gray francolin was calling out one morning, early morning in Rajasthan, and that's what I could manage to capture. Again, providing for higher shutter speeds in the forest. Very, very critical. Next up, golden hour shots. I did mention in the start that You need to have uh, the ability to shoot in the morning, and obviously lighting is key for a good photograph. So the golden hour is nothing but a 1 hour window briefly after sunrise or before sunset, and its light is a little bit more diffuse during these periods, and therefore you get better shots. And because the light is diffused, you are less likely to blow out highlights or lose detail in the shadows that are difficult to avoid during the strong light during the day. And these are two frames again from Bharatpur, which is on the right was an evening shot where I pretty much didn't do anything. This is how it came, almost straight out of the camera. I didn't do much about it. On the left was a shot which was slightly in the morning, not exactly golden hour, maybe a little bit after that, but still there was a cloud cover and there was this pinkish tinge to that entire environment, and I thought I captured that as well. So if you have a good frame, right, we've talked about that in the beginning, but I thought I'd just reiterate, a well-framed photograph actually immediately draws out attention to the subject, and a viewer therefore makes a connect faster. For example, the hornbill on the left and the common hoopoe on the right, well, uh, especially on the right, I just basically cropped it into that portrait mode for Instagram. But if you see the branches of the tree where it was sitting actually provides uh, a natural kind of leading lines, like a perch or like a frame to that hoopoe, and that's where it stood out in terms of if you compare with other photographers who probably may not have had the same frame. Similarly, on the left, the data from the Bharatpur sanctuary, and on the right, the painted stock again from the sanctuary. This painted stock, especially, was the light was falling on the stock, which was slightly farther away. There was no way with even a 200, 500. I did not have a converter. I don't shoot with a converter. So this I couldn't go closer. So I just went a little bit wider and cropped it. So it gave a kind of a natural focus on the painted stock. So as I said earlier, it's not about always making good a close-up portrait of a particular bird. You can actually do it otherwise as well. Most importantly, a lot of people ask me that you must be going out often, you must be visiting places often. Uh, but the reality is that I generally shoot with a lot of common subjects pretty much every day. Uh, and the reason for that is you're not going to get new subjects every day. You go to a wildlife sanctuary and search for a tiger, you probably end up with seeing only deer, for that matter, or langurs for that matter. You go to a place like Bharatpur and you probably see deer both, and probably the bird which you wanted to see or the frame you wanted to see. And so, but it's not difficult to create frames like these with common animals. Like, for example, both are with spotted deer, both are from Bharatpur. I just played with light in both of them. And the one on the right is pretty much late afternoon when it was taken. The one on the left was morning. It's just a play of light which is there, and a little bit editing in Photoshop after that. So you can actually see the one on the left again, two uh, baby deer actually looking at me, one behind the other, and both stopped on the road, looked at me, and that's when I took that pic. On the right again, as I said, a stag which was there at Bharatpur. So common animals do make nice subjects as well. So it's not all about shooting with exotic animals or more colorful birds or whatever. So the message here is make the most of what is available. You have a camera, you create what you want to. Okay, now we've talked about variety of things, higher shutter speeds, we've talked about ISO capabilities, we've talked about a lot of other stuff. Does gear matter? Well, the answer to that is yes, it does. And no, it does not. Yes, in the cases where, let's say, you are wanting to shoot flying birds, or you wanting to shoot things at higher shutter speeds, and your existing camera has a limitation. Obviously, you would need better equipment to do that. There are a lot of cameras today which have eye focus, which have got a variety of other things, which have got faster engines for processing. I'm saying all that is necessary. But if you don't have that, and I'll give you an example. This was taken with a mobile phone. This was taken with a Samsung C9. I was not carrying a camera that day. So I just Took this on a beach in Andhra Pradesh with my cell phone which I had that day, and you can write any story on that two individuals which are there in that frame walking towards the other side, with the sea on the right and a slightly diffused habitation on the left. So it does not matter if you're not having the gear, make the most with what you have. Be creative. We talked about being creative on the earlier thing where you had common subjects and you're playing with light to create frames. Here is what we are making use of reflection. So this was on the left is an olive back pipet which I shot in Sattal, with the reflection very clear in the water. I could have actually cropped it closer and gone with just the bird, a close up of the bird, but I chose not to. Took the reflection in, and on the right is a reflection in a puddle of water. We call it a puddlegram, where a friend taught me how to take these and how to kind of lie on the ground and take these reflection shots. So the right one is from Singapore, again shot with a phone. It was not shot with a camera. So again, slightly deviating from birds, but I thought I'll share it. These as well. So night scrapes were taken with a OnePlus mobile phone. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that point that with normal phones, you can still take very, very good, sharp pictures. It's just that how you need to understand how capable your equipment is.
Yeah.
The other one, last almost to the end of the presentation. So pay attention to the background. The background should be as simple as clutter-free as possible so that it doesn't pull the viewer's attention away from the main subject of the photo. And I'll give you two examples where I went wrong, because you see these two photographs. They are sharp enough. The one on the left is an egret, but it was standing in a place which is very, very distracting. Okay, so there was no way I could have avoided it. I haven't published this photo at all because it's just too distracting for anybody. It's not a very good photograph. On the right is a greater painted snipe. It was well within the bushes. There was no way I could have avoided that clutter at the back. I did post it because you don't get to see a painted snipe every day. But again, if I had a choice, I wouldn't have. It's just too cluttered in terms of a background. One way of actually avoiding this distracting background is if you can just move your subject or you change your angle of shot, which you do. Even if that doesn't work, it may be possible to obscure it by taking a wider aperture, or you kind of go close to the subject as possible, and try and keep the background as neutral as possible so that it's the subject which stands out rather than the background. I think that's very, very important when you go about taking photographs. So key takeaways, right? As I said, focus first, the frame afterwards. You may lose the subject a few times, but really that doesn't matter. Eye level shots, I kind of think they make a very, very big difference. Focus on the eyes to draw attention to the photograph. Landscape versus portrait, we talked about briefly. Golden hour shots allow you to be a little bit more creative with the light. So please go ahead and try those as much as possible. Most importantly, know the limitations of your camera. And the other thing is make the most of what is available. Example on your camera gears, not everyone has a high-end camera and a prime lens, so people do magic with their standard equipment as well. Avoid cluttered frames and be willing to experiment with photographs. Selective sharing is what I have talked about. Learn from your mistakes. You know, getting overexposed, blurry, or badly composed photos can be frustrating, but learn from them and see where you can improve. Just don't delete it and say that, okay, my camera is bad or I'm bad or whatever. Things take time to settle down, and once you start doing it, they start improving. And above all, lastly, it's please enjoy yourself while taking photographs. And remember, it's not a race. Thank you.
It was amazing. It was a cool journey. You kind of covered everything from the very basic to the complete experience of your journey. So that was amazing. I think I'm very sure that all of us got one or the other thing to learn from the photos as well as from your words. So thank
Yeah,
Right.
it
Thank you
was
so much.
like crisp to the point.
yes.
No, I
Okay.
tried
Very
making it.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have few
Thank you.
questions
Yeah,
and a bunch of comments.
yeah, a lot of comments. One question is how to approach a bird without disturbing it while photographing.
That's a tough one, actually. And I mean, you obviously can't ask the bird permission for it. But most importantly, you have to spend some time in the field and try and understand as to what the bird behavior will be. Uh, and even if you're approaching it, do it very subtly, do it very, very gradually, very carefully, very silently. Uh, any sudden movement from your side would actually give away your position, and therefore it will kind of make the bird very, very nervous and make it fly away. So you just have to be careful. There have been, more often than not, there have been times when I'm approaching a bird, it just flies away, and then you have to read on, you have to
Yeah,
do it all over again. So it comes by experience, hit and trial only. There's no set methodology for doing it, unless obviously you're sitting in a hide, and then pretty much the birds come and right in front of you, and you can shoot them.
I think I completely agree on it. Continuous visit to a place definitely give a kind of, if it is going to be the same location and if
Yeah,
you are visiting over and over again, that does help. And
yeah,
step by step movement and get
that's right.
down from the vehicle if there is a possibility, check the surroundings and crawl, make yourself
Yeah,
on ground level
on
and
ground.
go
Yeah.
steady as possible.
another question is from Ellie. With many new cameras having ISO invariants, will still be a need to pump the ISO in the camera so much?
Not really. At least my experience has been that even if the camera uh, goes up all the way to 52,000 or 75,000 or 104,000, I really haven't used that entire range of ISO at all. Uh, the max I would have probably gone up is to up to 3,000, but that's it. Nothing else beyond that. And if because see, the other thing is that you can go up all the way um, to that high number, but pretty much the picture would come out to be very bad. I don't think it's going to
Yeah,
come out to be very good. And in that span of time, maybe which is within seconds, you have to bump up the ISO and shoot a bird. I just don't think it's worth it. I think probably settle for uh, something lower, 3,000, 4,000 maybe, not more than that.
A comment which we can add on that note is like in case if you have a software like denoise AI that can really work on high ISO. We
Yeah,
start to try it very recently, but then even if you're going to push it up to, we I think we I between me and Hermi we tried it up to 12,000, right? Hermi,
yeah,
yeah, around 12,000 we tried and it's definitely working. It's something new for us too, but then it for getting rid of the noise even in the higher side. And before using a denoise, I think we were keeping a higher aperture cap for 4,000 to between 4,000 and 6,000. That's one thing of using a higher end camera. You can to some extent get rid of the noise if you are on
yeah,
the higher end of the camera. So we keep a cap if we are on a low light condition like 6,000 or something, and then we try it. I think so. If you have a possibility, understand your camera definitely is a big
yeah,
thing, and then try to put a cap if it is a um, low light condition to 3,000 or 4,000, whichever works for your camera, and
that's
then
right.
going ahead will be better.
Yeah,
yeah. So we have another comment from Ellie saying that the deer shots do come out from a fairy tale book.
That's true.
oh,
It's beautiful.
thank you, thank you, thank you so much for that appreciation. Really appreciate it.
What is one bird species that you are looking forward to photograph?
There's so many of them, but one thing which I'm kind of really looking forward to it. And I think I've missed the season for it. Is the rain quail. I haven't nailed it yet. I saw it, but I just got that one shot and it didn't turn out to be correct. So it's still next year. The hunt goes on, literally. It's always like that. So
Yeah.
it's not that you will get the first time you see a bird, you'll probably nail it. I don't think that really happens. You'll be very lucky to do that if you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Totally
for
agree.
birds like this, which are smaller in size, which keep moving, very difficult to shoot them. So till next year for the rain quail, I guess.
Yeah. And can you share one good location for bird photography in India?
In India, I would probably say your neighborhood. Uh, but if you're willing to step out, there are a few bird photography locations. In North India, you'd probably see Sattal is a good place to go to. You get a lot of different variety of birds. Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary is there in Rajasthan. It's about 200 kilometers from Delhi. You can go there. October to March is a very good season to travel. And then you have places like Bhigwan in Maharashtra, which is also a bird's paradise for those looking to not to travel too far away. And there is obviously Thattekad and likewise places in the southern part of India. So those are good places for birds. For raptors, you might try Little Run of Kutch, or you might try Tal Chapar in Rajasthan near Bikaner. So those are, I would probably say, those are the ones which come to the top of my mind right now.
Okay. One comment from Kalika, very enlightening presentation and thought-provoking. Thank you, Shashank, and great watermark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Good that you liked it. Yeah. I don't claim to be an expert. I don't claim to be an expert on it. Just whatever I had encountered in the last 3-4 years is what I shared.
But your
Great.
collection is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What is your favorite combination of camera lens for bird photography, and what do you suggest the range?
That's a difficult one, actually. I have pretty much been using a 200, 500 for a very long time. Earlier with a DSLR, and now with the with the with the Nikon Z6 II, which is the mirrorless camera from Nikon. I would probably say if you're using Nikon, I think that's 200, 500 works best. It's not a very expensive lens as well. It kind of tick marks all the boxes, including cost, and that's something which you can look at. I personally am looking to upgrade once the Z series lenses come out, the 200, 600. Hopefully that should be out in November, and that's something I'm looking to upgrade to. And hopefully the autofocus of the Z6 II would actually work better with the Z series lens without the adapter.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed. I think that's what I would go to. But coming back to the question in terms of what is an ideal lens, I think a 100 400 or a 200 500 or a 200 600 is perhaps what you should look at if you really want to do bird photography. I think that you would need that reach. You definitely don't need a converter, but at least from a reach perspective, you'd need at least 500 mm or a 600 mm focal length. You don't need primes to do that. You can just have a variable focal length to work with and a variable aperture as well. That just works fine.
That's great.
That's great.
Anu Malhotra is saying amazing, beautiful, very informative and interesting.
Right.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
a lot of comments
On the same line. Even
yes. So that's all the questions we have for now. If anything comes in the comment, we will forward to you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you again. Thank you so much for this crisp and clear presentation.
To the point.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity once again. And
you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
So that was an amazing presentation, and it's just a repetition that it was to the point, and it's very short, and put it in a very nice way with adding 2 frames of the same subject, and how can you go, how different it is when you're putting it on vertical, horizontal. That was
very well explained.
Background and everything was cool,
and a lot of notes that you can always refer to. Yeah. So
that was it.
That's it for today. And yeah. Tell me.
So the next one is on when, Hermi? You have any clue?
Yes, we have another photographer giving a presentation day after tomorrow, which is on Friday.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, same time.
Okay.
Another wonderful photographer. I'll be posting about it
Okay.
tonight or tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, the earlier the
Yes.
better. So let's see what it is going to be. And any other wonderful news from your side?
Wonderful news is I'm preparing for another Masai Mara trip from September 24th to 30th.
Okay.
We have 8 people joining us.
That's great.
It's a 7-day trip to our own Mara Trails camp. Yeah,
That's always an experience,
I
and I'm really looking forward to
I,
be
I
there.
actually don't feel like coming back from there when I stay there. So yeah, going back again. The trip starts from 24th.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have another trip from October 1st to 5th by in association with Photowalk Connect,
That's
Subodh
great.
Shetty and Nikon
That's great.
Middle East. So yeah, waiting for all these things. So I might not be available during the next few webinars again.
Only me going to be there. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I will be
Yes.
missing you, but then, being in Mara, I totally agree. That's
Yeah.
going to be the best part of it. Good luck with that. And
Yes.
this is one opportunity for us. And because the more people we host in Mara, we are getting more opportunity to support the Mara community. So that's the whole idea behind Mara Trails. The 50% of the profit, what we make from this is going to go in community development and conservation activities. So the more people support in our journey is directly supporting in a bigger way to support the community.
The Maasai community over there.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we
So
appreciate everybody's support, and don't forget we are still in COVID time. And if you are in Nipah, and by any chance, if you are from Kerala, please be extremely careful because it's not just COVID. Now it is Nipah too, so it's a crazy time for across the world. Be safe, take care, get your vaccines, and use all kind of precautions, be it in the form of double layer of mask, hand sanitizer, or anything to keep you and the rest of the world safe.
okay, then let's say
It's
bye
fine.
for today.
Yeah.
We'll
Take
meet
care
you day
and
after tomorrow.